Welcome back to the channel. Tonight we invite you to journey with us into one of the most complex and controversial chapters of modern American history, the final years of the Vietnam War. It was a time of chaos abroad and division at home, a time when American families were glued to their televisions, watching a war unfold half a world away, wondering when it would end and how. Amid this uncertainty, President Richard Nixon stepped forward with a promise: peace with honor. His answer to that promise? A strategy called Vietnamization, a word unfamiliar to most at the time, yet one that would define the final years of the war. But what did it really mean? And what hidden strategies were behind the public speeches? Tonight we take a closer look at Vietnamization, not just as a policy, but as a covert effort to shift the burden of war, reshape American foreign policy, and quietly exit one of the most devastating conflicts in U.S. history. In 1969, a new word entered the American political vocabulary: Vietnamization. It was President Richard Nixon's strategy to end one of the most controversial wars in U.S. history. But behind that word lay a complex and, at times, secretive plan to shift responsibility, reshape the war, and change America's role in global conflict. When Nixon took office, the United States had been embroiled in the Vietnam War for over 4 years. More than 500,000 American troops were deployed. Casualties were mounting. The peace talks in Paris had stalled. And back home, Americans were bitterly divided. Many urged Nixon to pull out of Vietnam immediately, to bring the troops home and end what many called Johnson's War. But Nixon chose a different path. Many urged Nixon to pull out of Vietnam immediately, to bring the troops home and end what many called Johnson's War. But Nixon chose a different path. His plan was simple in theory, but complex in execution: train, arm, and equip the South Vietnamese forces so that they could defend their own country. Then, step by step, American troops would withdraw. This was Vietnamization. But it wasn't just a military strategy, it was a political balancing act. Publicly, Nixon spoke of peace and gradual withdrawal. Privately, he authorized secret bombing campaigns in neighboring Cambodia and Laos, targeting North Vietnamese supply lines. These actions were hidden even from the American public and from Congress. While calling for diplomacy in Paris, Nixon was sending a very different message to Hanoi: that America would not leave without leverage. The message was clear: negotiate or face continued force. Over time, Nixon's plan showed results. By the end of 1969, 60,000 American troops had returned home. U.S. casualties decreased. South Vietnam took over more combat operations. Critics argued that Vietnamization simply delayed the inevitable, that the South Vietnamese forces would never be strong enough to resist the North. And yet, Nixon insisted this path would bring what he called peace with honor. At home, opposition to the war only grew. The silent majority supported Nixon's strategy, but the anti-war movement was louder than ever. Tensions escalated after the My Lai massacre and the Kent State shootings, both of which shook public trust. Even as troops came home, America remained deeply scarred, socially, politically, morally. In 1973, the Paris Peace Accords were signed. The last American troops left Vietnam shortly after, but Vietnamization had only delayed what came next. In April 1975, North Vietnamese tanks rolled into Saigon. The war was over, but not the debate. Was Vietnamization a brilliant strategic pivot or a slow-motion retreat? Was Nixon's covert policy a path to peace or just a way to avoid blame? More than 50 years later, the answers remain as complex as the war itself. Vietnamization was supposed to end the war. Instead, it became a case study in how wars change and how leaders try to end them.